All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is thank you to Rabbi Shor, and thank you to Rabbi Berman, and thank you to Chana Spivak, and thank you to the staff at the OUisrael Center. It's always such an incredible schus, Baruch Hashem, to be able to be here and to be able to teach some Torah here, Baruch Hashem. It's Rabbi Shor makes it sound like, I have to go out of my way to make the time. The truth is, when I knew that we were coming to Eretz Yisrael, my first... So it's an incredible schus, an incredible privilege, Baruch Hashem, to be here and to be able to learn with all of you and to be able to, Baruch Hashem, be in this very special place from which so much Torah disseminates, not just to the Jews of Yerushalayim, but Baruch Hashem to Jews worldwide. I want to begin by thanking Ira and Miriam Grossman, who dedicated the shir today. I just saw it before. Ira, by Israel and Miriam Grossman, in honor of Klal Yisrael. In honor of Klal Yisrael, in honor of Besoros Tovos to Klal Yisrael, in honor of Miras Hashem, the return of our hostages, the safety and success of our soldiers, and Halavai Miras Hashem, instead of these coming 3 weeks being times in which we commemorate historical loss and sadness, may they be days in Miras Hashem in which we celebrate the incredible milestones, the incredible rebuilding and geula of Am Yisrael. I also want to take the opportunity just to recognize the presence of Mr. and Mrs. Openden, who are the parents of Adina Zahavi, Zichrona Livracha, the young woman from Kochav Yaakov who valiantly saved her children as her house was engulfed in flames, and literally was an Akeres Abayis, an Eim Habanim Smecha to the last moment, who literally gave her life for her children. Her precious parents, who are dear friends, are here with us in the shir today. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, that Adina's neshama has an aliyah and her family a nechama. I want to share with you a little bit of a different insight into the coming days. We know that tomorrow we mark the beginning of the 3 weeks. Tomorrow marks the beginning, Shavasar B'Tammuz, 17th of Tammuz. And there's much rabbinic literature that's been written over the millennia, over the last 2,000 years, about the notion of these 3 weeks. What is it exactly that we are mourning? What is it exactly that we're supposed to be doing? See, here's what's incredibly important. The Mishnah Berurah has an interesting statement. The Mishnah Berurah says that on a fast day, if a person just goes ahead and abstains from eating and drinking, but doesn't engage in the process of tshuva, doesn't engage in the cathartic process of comprehensive change, then they haven't accomplished anything. Meaning, a lot of times, and this is true in our Yiddishkeit in general, that a lot of times we go through the mechanistic details of halacha, we go through, again, the behavioral precepts of our Judaism, and we do everything as we are supposed to. But yet at the same time, for whatever the reason, we don't feel changed. We don't feel moved. We don't feel any different. And that's because we know this, that, it used to be, and this is obviously different even here in Eretz Yisrael than in Chutz La'aretz, but it used to be that the challenge for a Jew, let's talk about in America, for example, after the war, the challenge for a Jew was being observant. So now, Baruch Hashem, in America, even in America, the challenge is no longer observance. Right? You could be an observant Jew and Baruch Hashem, have any career that you want. You could be an observant Jew, and there's really nothing that stands in your way. Observance is not the challenge. Allah has kama v'kama here in Eretz Yisrael. So what's our challenge? If observance is no longer the challenge, what's the challenge? I think the challenge often is inspiration. Is that sometimes we go through our lives as religious Jews. I'm doing anything and everything that I have to do, maybe even more, but sometimes it's the feeling that's lacking. The neshama's not there. Am I going to Olam Haba? Of course, we're all going to Olam Haba. Am I doing any Averas? Trying not to, right? Am I doing mitzvahs? Absolutely plenty of them. But yet with all of that, sometimes there's a little bit of an emptiness. Sometimes there's a little bit of a void. Sometimes I know that I'm doing what God is asking me to do on a behavioral level, but I'm just not sure that from a neshamadika level, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. And I think especially when we come to these 3 weeks, I think all of us absolutely know what it is that we're not supposed to do. right? Differences between Sfardim and Ashkenazim, but I know that tomorrow is a fast day, and so I know exactly what I'm allowed to do on a fast day and not allowed to do on a fast day. And then we get into the 3 weeks and the 9 days, and we are all incredibly proficient with all of the restrictions. And then I know Matzei Tisha B'Av, again still until the 10th of Av. I know all of the halachas. I know what to do and what not to do behaviorally. But what's my avoda? What is it exactly that I'm supposed to do emotionally, cognitively, spiritually, over the course of the next 3 weeks? And I apologize, the title on the sheet says Tisha B'Av, the gift of grief. So it was really supposed to be titled the 3 weeks, the gift of grief, because it's not a Tisha B'Av shir, it's a 3 weeks shir. So let's analyze this. That's what I like to try to be able to do today a little bit, is to understand what is our spiritual avoda. What is our spiritual service during these next 3 weeks? So let's begin with the pasuk from Eicha. The pasuk says as follows: Golsa Yehuda me'oni u'merov avodah. So Yehuda went into exile because of affliction and great servitude. He yashva b'goyim, she settled among the nations. Lo matza manoach, and found no rest. Korotfeh hisiguha bein hamitzarim. All of her pursuers overtook her between the boundaries. Now, of course, the phrase bein hamitzarim, right? We're all familiar with this phrase, bein hamitzarim. So how do we normally translate that phrase, bein hamitzarim? Right, the 3 weeks. So the way we often translate it is, right, the 3 weeks is between the tsaros, right, the tsar. On one hand, remember, these 3 weeks are bookended by difficult days. Tomorrow, Shivasar B'Tammuz, 17th of Tammuz, the walls of Yerushalayim were breached. And then again, the other bookend, Tisha B'Av, when the first Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash were both destroyed. So we often translate Bein HaMitzarim, ultimately again is between the tsar, between the days of pain. But the truth is the real phrase itself comes from Eicha, Bein HaMitzarim, between the boundaries. Between the boundaries. The boundary, again, Shivasar B'Tammuz creating one part of the boundary, and Tisha B'Av creating the other part of the boundary. But I want to share with you something. I saw this idea actually last year, and it changed my life. Truth is, not a day goes by that I don't see something that changes my life. I say, people tell me I overuse this phrase, but I don't. It's true. So take a look at number 2. The great tzaddik Maggid HaMezrich. Maggid HaMezrich was the Talmud Mufak, the primary disciple of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. And the Maggid writes as follows. Listen to this. He says, Dahainu, kol misherodef lahamlich esabore, yuchal lahasig yoser dafka b'yamim elo ben hamitzarim. So it's interesting, just so you understand the phrase. The pasuk in Eicha is Korotfeha hisiguha bein hamitzarim. Korotfeha, right? All of her pursuers. Who's being pursued over here in the pasuk? Who's being pursued? Klal Yisrael. Who are the pursuers? Everyone else, right? The nations of the world. The nations of the world. You know, one of the interesting things I think that we have seen since October 7th, and I say we because I know that our experiences since October 7th are so different in Eretz Yisrael than out of Eretz Yisrael. But I think one of the most incredible things that so many of us in Chutz La'aretz have seen since October 7th is a dynamic that, at least in my lifetime, I always knew but never saw. That the world doesn't like us. Always knew it, but the truth is never actually felt it in an actual, tangible way. That's the pasuk in Eicha. Kol rotfeha hisigua bein hamitzarim. So just to understand the imagery over here. The imagery is Klal Yisrael is running away. Klal Yisrael is running away. And what happens? Everyone, our enemies are running after us. Now, hisiguha means what? Hisiguha means to capture, to reach, right? So our enemies catch up with us. Where do they catch up with us? Bein hamitzarim. Now, again, the imagery here is so important. Remember, between the boundaries, those of you who are learning Daf Yomi, we had this in Baba Basra a little bit. Fields were demarcated by boundaries. And often, again, what were the boundaries? The boundaries were actually raised levels of earth. Raised levels of earth. So if you have two adjoining fields, you could technically have two boundary markers, which means that area in between is very narrow. So the imagery that Yirmiyahu is painting over here in Eicha is korotfeh hisigua. Everyone's running after Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is being pursued. Klal Yisrael is running away. And what happens? And they catch us. Where do they catch us? Bein HaMetzarim. We end up getting wedged in together. We end up getting wedged in together. Right? Everyone's running after us. You know, it's also incredible. And I know all of you, Baruch Hashem, who have the zchus to live here, so you see this every day. But for those of us who are still visitors, it is one of the most incredible and beautiful things every single time. The most incredible thing about Eretz Yisrael, contemporary state of Israel, is that the identity of the Jew has been transformed from victim to victor. It is even now, as we stand in the middle of a war. You know, my wife and I were up north. We were in Tveria yesterday. And I don't know my way around Tveria. So I'm driving. Suddenly, Waze cuts out. It comes back on. Except Waze tells me that I'm in Beirut. I said, in Beirut. I'm like, oh my gosh. Right? I'm hoping my wife didn't see the screen, right? Because she didn't see. It was incredible. So obviously all of you know, the army often has to jam whatever the signals are, so that Hezbollah can't launch their guided rockets. But here I was in the middle. But what was incredible, I'm not going to lie, for a moment there was absolutely a pachad there before I knew what was going on. But then I realized something absolutely amazing. For 2,000 years, we were the ones being pursued. For 2,000 years, we were the ones who were running. And isn't it incredible that we are zocheh to live in times where even when we are badly hurt, like we are, and even as we limp a little bit like we did in the aftermath of October 7th, we regroup, we regain our footing, and we become the pursuers. No one runs after Klal Yisrael anymore as a victim. We are no longer the victims. We are sometimes the victims of mankind's brutality and barbarism. But after we dry our tears, get up and dust ourselves off, we'll pursue those who pursue us. Just understand how incredible it is. For 2,000 years, Jews read this pasuk in Eicha, and it spoke directly to their circumstances. How privileged we are to live in a time where we could read this very pasuk, and we could say, wow, that's the past. That's the past. But we are zocheh to be living as part of an incredible new future. But let's go back to the Maggid. The Maggid writes as follows. The Maggid has a dramatic different interpretation. He says, what does it mean? Kol rotfeh hisigua bein hamitzarim. That ultimately, again, we translated, all those who pursued Klal Yisrael caught up with her between the boundaries. The Maggid says, Dahainu, number 2, right-hand column, Dahainu, kol mi sherodef lahamlichas haborei. Whoever in these days wants to run to anoint HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we'll see what that means in just a moment, Yuchal lahasig yoser dafka b'yamim elu bein hamitzarim. Get ready for this. The Maggid the Mezrich writes, the next 21 days, the 3 weeks, bein hamitzarim, a person who yearns to catch up with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a person who yearns to go ahead and reignite a passionate relationship with God, a person who yearns for a closeness with the Ribono Shel Olam, it is more easily attainable during these next 20 days than any other time throughout the year. What's the pshat? Right, and by the way, just so you understand, so look how the Maggid interprets the phrase. Kol rotfeha, whoever runs after her. Who's the her? Who's the her? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the shechina. Remember, again, without getting into this, in Zohar writes that sometimes the shechina itself is referred to as nukva and duchra. Sometimes the shechina is referred to as the feminine and sometimes the masculine. Here the Maggid the Mezrich says referred to in the feminine, kol rotfeha. Whoever runs after the shechina, hisigua, you could catch up with her. When? Bein hamitzarim. Now. Now is a time that is auspicious and ripe for reconnection, recalibration, and rejuvenation of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You'll say to yourself, that's crazy. That's crazy. It's the 3 weeks. It's destruction. It's everything that's been lost. And look what he writes. He says, L'mashal, Ki kishasar yoshi beveso, as a masa mutelas, asher lo kol ish v'ish yachal lavo pnima. Listen to what the Rebbe says. He says, when the king sits in his palace, so what happens? You decide you want to go visit the king in his palace. So you decide, what, I don't have anything this afternoon. I'm going into the palace to see the king. You walk to the gates, and what's going to happen? You say, I'm here to see the king. And what are they going to tell you? What are they going to tell you? Take a hike, right? Go. Who are you? Who are you? When the king sits in his palace, there's not automatic and immediate access for everyone. He says, Masha'en kain, Emasar over b'shukim u'berachavos chutz the palter inshallah. But when the king is out and about, when the king is outside of his palace, and the king is walking around in the marketplace, the king is walking around outside, asu karov l'chol karov. So then he is close to anyone who reaches out to him. V'yaz in shavas kalakarim b'shmo. And ultimately, again, he's able to hear anyone who cries out to him. V'china nimshal adas. Ki bizman hazeh, so says the Maggid HaMezrash, listen to this. Bizman hazeh. Bizman hazeh means this time, the times in which we're living. There is no Beis HaMikdash yet. There is not yet a third Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, kitzipor nodedes min kano, kein ish noded mim komo. When there's a Beis HaMikdash, there's a palace. And when there's a palace, the king resides in the palace. And in that case, we know. Right? Remember, we're going to have a third Beis HaMikdash. We're going to have a third Beis HaMikdash in Mirat Hashem Hei Rabbi Ameinu. Right? You decide. Tell the family, pack it up. We're going to the Beis HaMikdash. You go in. How far are you getting? How far are you getting into Beis HaMikdash? Well, it depends. The truth is, it depends if you're a Kohen, if you're a Levi, right? But if you're like a regular guy like me, right? Bless you, right? Bless you. If you're a regular person like me, the closest I am getting is into the courtyard. And that's assuming that I'm tahar. It's assuming a whole bunch of things. No matter how badly I want to ascend the steps to go through the golden doors of Shar Nikanor and to come back down, right, into the Ezras Levi, I can't. There's a limit. There's a block. There's a wall. There's a ceiling. And it's incredible to think about it this way. When the Beis HaMikdash Meretz Hashem comes back from Hei Rabbi Ameinu, there's a limit to how far you can go. There's only one person who goes all the way, and that's the Kohen Gadol, and that's not even every day. Right? That's Yom Kippur. That's Yom Kippur. For the rest of us, there's an absolute wall that divides us. Says the Maggid HaMezrash, get ready for this, and I know it sounds so strange. To a certain degree, when there is no Beis HaMikdash, there's even greater access. When the shechina doesn't have a home, he quotes the pasuk over here, such from Mishlei, Ketzipor nodedes min kana. Just like when the bird doesn't have a nest, it flies everywhere. Kein ish noded mim komo. He says, Hainu shashchina begalus. When the shechina doesn't have a home, when the shechina isn't in one place, do you know where the shechina is? You know where everywhere. Can I tell you something? This is the chatzi nechama we have when we lose our loved ones as well. There is nothing more painful in life than losing someone you love. So where does nechama come from? So part of nechama comes with the passage of time. That's part of it. Part of nechama also comes that the neshama understands something amazing. In our physical forms, right, we are limited interacting with one another like this. A neshama is accessible anywhere and everywhere. The notion that we put up a matzeva, right? Why do we put up a matzeva? You ever think about this for just a moment? The matzeva is where the guf is buried. The guf disintegrates. The guf goes away. The body is just the kli, it's just the receptacle to house the soul. So why put so much emphasis on that address where the guf is buried? It's a very simple reason. Because we're physical beings, so I need a physical address. It's not for the neshama. It's not for the neshama. The neshama is everywhere and anywhere. The neshama knows everything that's happening with his family. The neshama is acutely aware of what's going on in this world. And the neshama can be connected with anywhere and everywhere you are. The matzeva is not for the neshama. Right? The matzeva is not for the mace. It's not for the person who passed away. The matzeva... Eitan, shalom aleichem. The matzeva ultimately again is for the living. It's to give a physical address through which we could connect. So the Maggid HaMezrich says something, and I told you, I promise you, this is going to change your life. Right? I'm telling you, if they served coffee at this year and you were a little bit more awake, you'd be falling off your chair right now. I'm telling you. You have to understand what the Maggid just did. What the Maggid just did is fundamentally changed the entire dynamics of the 3 weeks. By the way, herein lies just in general the beauty of Chassidus, in general about the ability to pull out simcha from everything. I thought that the entire avoda of the 3 weeks is to lose myself in the pain of Klal Yisrael's loss. Says the Maggid HaMezrich, yes, that's part of it, but also it's to rejoice in the incredible and overwhelming opportunity. The shechina is homeless. The shechina is homeless. Do you know what happens when the shechina is homeless? He is more accessible to each and every one of us than ever before. When there's a third Beis HaMikdash, you want to know where the Shechina resides? The Shechina always resides everywhere. But where is the Shechina concentrated? In the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. Holy of Holies. Now there's no Beis HaMikdash. Where is the Shechina? Like the famous Kotzker said. Someone once asked the Kotzker, where is the Ribono Shel Olam? To which the Kotzker answered, wherever you let him in. What is that? Where does the Kotzker get that from? It's the Maggid HaMezrich. When there is no Beis HaMikdash, the Shechina is everywhere. And that's why Kol Rotfa Hisigua Meinam Yisrael. Yes?
So if you say he's everywhere without their Beis, then why during this time is he so accessible to you all the time?
Because it's this time that we recognize that he's displaced. By the way, anytime, all the time, it's like people who say, I don't celebrate Mother's Day because every day is Mother's Day, right? Right, sure, every day, exactly. Anything that you say should be a true every day is usually, that's not the way mind works. Just like, I should thank Hashem for Yitzias Mitzrayim every day, which you do in Shema, but I still have Pesach that solidifies that. So you're right, this is a true dynamic every day. But at the same time, when is it concretized for us? Dafka in the 21 days in which we recognize that the Shechina is homeless. But yes, if I internalize this now, this is every day for me. Absolutely, absolutely. So to understand now the profundity of these days, the Shechina is homeless, and because the Shechina is homeless, therefore again, there is greater access than ever before. Lochein, look how the Maggid ends in number 2. Lochein, harishus nesuna l'chol adam lehiskarev el malko shel olam v'ona alehem. Therefore, again, look at the Maggid's words. Every single person has the ability to come close to Hashem, v'ona alehem, and Hashem answers them. Now, you always have to be careful with a phrase like that. Hashem answering you doesn't mean that what? It doesn't mean you get what you want. It just means you get an answer. Right? We know this, like in relationships, if you're in a relationship, the worst thing you could do to the person with whom you are in a relationship with is silence. Silence. Better to argue than to be silent. Now, sometimes it's better to be silent than to say certain things. That is absolutely true. But in general, silence is a lack of engagement. Argument, at least, is some form of engagement. Again, sometimes silence is good, like the Gemara says, if a word is worth 1 selah, then silence is worth 2. So definitely silence, it has its power. But at the end of the day, it says the Maggid HaMezrich, if I make a sincere effort to reach out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu during these days, Hu ona aleim, Hashem will answer me. So again, that's the Maggid HaMezrich. That's the Maggid HaMezrich. So hold on to that for just a second. Let's build this out a little bit more. Shulchan Aruch writes in number 3. Yet the Shulchan Aruch says that halacha l'maisa, every single person should constantly be upset, should be troubled by the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And by the way, this is not a din in the 3 weeks. If you look over here at the title, this is Shulchan Aruch, this is Siman Aleph, Sif Gimel. These are the halachos of how you conduct yourself in the morning. So the Shulchan Aruch says when you get started in your day, ultimately, again, a person should be troubled by the absence of the Beis HaMikdash. The Chozeh of Lublin writes in number 4, HaChacham tzalasa b'fanav avela b'libo. So the Chozeh says something amazing. Now, here's what's fascinating. You think that based on the Shulchan Aruch, so now, a person is always supposed to be upset about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The Chozeh says, Chozeh of Lublin says it's very easy to misinterpret this phrase and think that therefore a Jew is always supposed to be sad. And a Jew is always supposed to be downtrodden. Says the Chozeh, HaChacham, listen to this, Tzahalaso b'fanav ve'evlo b'libo. I love this phrase. Chozeh of Lublin says, on the outside, you should always look happy. Whatever pain you have, wear it on the inside. Wear it on the inside. But we see this concept in Chazal in so many different ways. Having Mekabalas called Adam B'Sever Panim Yafos. Your face is Rishus Harabim. It's public domain. So because it's public domain, you're not allowed to do anything that adversely impacts someone else in your public domain. So therefore the Chozeh says, externally, always B'Simcha. Whatever is broken and whatever hurts and whatever is pained, that's for you on the inside. That's for you on the inside. He goes on, he says, V'gam be'es, shomer chatzos, sha'omer tikun chatzos bebechi v'tachnun apal gemayim, im kol zeh, roi lios b'simcha ba'osa sha'a. The Chozeh says something amazing. He says, even if a person says Tikkun Chatzos is the beautiful mystical prayer that is said over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So even if a person says Tikkun Chatzos, and again you're crying, supplications, tears, now the Chozeh says, Im kol zeh roi lios b'simcha ba'osa shah. You still have to be happy. Now, by the way, only Jews could say stuff like this, and it makes sense. Right? Anyone else says something like that, you just contradicted yourself. I should be crying, my heart should be broken into a million pieces, but I should still be happy. And only we can say, I actually know what that means. I actually know what that means. The Jew, Rabbi Soloveitchik spoke about the idea that in general in Judaism, we do not go ahead and commemorate historical events. But rather, again, for example, he says Pesach. So Pesach, we don't remember the Exodus. Rather, what do? What does the Mishnah say? Chayiv Adam Niros es Asmo Kilu Hu Yatsa Mitzrayim. I'm obligated to see myself as if I left Egypt. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says, because we model HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Ribbon Shalom is past, present, and future. Haya, Hove, V'yiyeh. All in one time. Rabbi Soloveitchik calls this the unitive time consciousness. I don't know what it means, but it sounds great, right? The unitive time consciousness. Living in all spheres of time simultaneously. Well, there's also a unitive emotional consciousness, where I could live in multiple emotional planes at the same time. I could be heartbroken, and I could be besimcha. And it's not a contradiction. I think actually, most of us live this way every single day. There's not a day that goes by that I am not overwhelmingly heartbroken for something that is happening in our people. Right? You take the time to think for just a moment, right? We think about this for just a second. We think about the fact that as we sit here in this beautiful Makom Torah, over 120 of our brothers and sisters languish in captivity. You stop to think about that for just a moment. And how can your heart not be torn into a million pieces? We think about the karbanos that Klal Yisrael has had to offer. We think about the dangers that our precious soldiers face day in and day out. How does the heart not break into a million pieces? But at the same time, there's so much to be happy about. There's so many great things. There's so many beautiful things. There's so many incredible things. It's interesting. I've come to find that, when you ask people, how are you doing? How are you doing? People almost feel compelled to say, everything is good considering the circumstances. It's almost as if, people feel guilty for saying all is good. Can I tell you something? You don't have to give the qualifier despite the circumstances. Everyone knows the circumstances. We're living the circumstances. And by the way, we've been living these circumstances for 2,000 years. Just the difference is that many of us have never experienced things like Klal Yisrael has undergone since October 7th. So for us, it's a new reality. For Klal Yisrael, there's nothing new here. There's no panim chadashos ba'o lekan. This is the first time that nations have bartered with Jewish lives? It's not. The first time that such barbarism has been visited upon young and old, women and children. So for us, it's jarring because for many of us, we've never seen it before. We've never seen it before. But when you take a step back from your personal identity and regress into a Klal Yisrael identity, there's nothing new here. So you don't have to give the qualifier. It's okay. We're all heartbroken. But what the Chozeh of Lublin is saying, what does the Jew do? When somebody asks you how you're doing, you say, you know what, Baruch Hashem, life is great, and it's only going to get greater. Things are wonderful, and they're only going to become better. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, and we're only going to see the love even more. The Chozeh says, when you say Tikkun Chatzos, say it with a broken heart, crying, but yet still be happy. Be sad in your heart for whatever is going on, but externally, always has to be b'simcha. Take a look, one more piece that will tie this together. The Nitei Gavriel, Rav Gavriel Sinner, writes as follows. He says, in number 5, he says, we'll tie this together. He says, V'nei Marsha b'chidushi agados, hishva es chaf aleph yomim. Get ready for this. So the Marsha equates the 21 days. Just get ready for this. There are 21 days between Shavas Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Im chaf aleph yemei slicha v'simcha miyom tov rishon shal Rosh Hashanah Ad Chaf Aleph B'Tishrei Shehu Hoshana Rabba Yom Gemar Achasim Kedisa B'Midrashos. Get ready for this. The Maharsha says there are 2 periods of 21 days within the Jewish calendar. One of them is between Shavas B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. The other is between Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah. And the Maharsha says they are exactly the same. They're exactly the same. I could not think of 2 periods of time that are more different. Look what he writes. He says, get ready for this. Ki kimosha achaf alef yom shem Rosh Hashanah v'Hoshana Rabbah toldos libun avon v'chapara le'enhein. The 21 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they are simchadik days. They're joyous days. Why? What are they? They're days of forgiveness, clean slate, tabla rasa, brand new beginning. He says, so too Gamkein. Yemei Aleph Yom Paranios Miyuzayim B'Tammuz at Tisha B'Av. So too the 21 days between Shavasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Hayatoldos Libun Avonos. These are days of forgiveness. Ki atzaros v'yisurin mechaprin kemo sha'amru hagalos mechaper. Isn't this absolutely incredible? And now let's just tie this all together. There's a linkage. Let's work backwards. There's a linkage between the 21 days between Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah and the 21 days between Shavasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. The 21 days between Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah are the happiest days of the year. You know, it's interesting that as much as there's a certain fear that revolves around judgment, there's also a simcha, right? What's the simcha? Simcha is, at the end of the journey, forgiven. You know, it's interesting, this Sasemis brings down, he says, on Matzah Yom Kippur, by Ma'ariv, right? So not everybody knows this. There is Ma'ariv after Ne'ilah, right? It's a lot of times, right? But there's one additional prayer, right? So by Ma'ariv on Matzah Yom Kippur, so the Sasemis says, we say, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Forgive me, Hashem, that I have sinned. Forgive me, Hashem, that I have sinned. That's a Sasemis. Really? I have to say that on Motzei Yom Kippur? What could I possibly have done? I just finished Ne'ilah. I just finished Hashem Hu Elokim. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokim Hashem Echad. I'm pure. I'm great. What have Slach Lanu? What could I, again, let's go through this. What could I have done? I've been fasting the whole day. I'm too tired to even speak Lashon Hara. Right? There's nothing I could possibly do. You know what the Sassama says? Why am I saying Slach Lanu? Because forgive me, God, for not believing that I can be forgiven. Sometimes we don't believe that we get second chances. And we don't believe that we are worthy of forgiveness. And we don't believe that we are worthy of a new start. And we don't believe that we could have not just a brand new chapter, but a brand new book. Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Forgive me, Hashem, for not believing that forgiveness. So the 21 days between Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah are the happiest days of the year. Because as scary as judgment is, nothing in this world is better than a new beginning that comes on the heels of beautiful divine forgiveness. And therefore, says the Nitigar, says the Maharsha, the days between Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av are the exact same dynamic. Days of forgiveness, days of absolution, days of new beginning. Now, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? 21 sounds fantastic. The problem is, where do you get that from? Besides the connection of 21, what are you talking about? But now, let's go back. Now, because it's the Magid of Mezrich always comes through. And the Magid says, now I understand this whole dynamic. Because in these 21 days, the dislocation of the shechina, the fact that the shechina is homeless, makes him more accessible than ever. And that accessibility gives me opportunity for connection. That opportunity for connection, ultimately, like the Chozeh of Lublin says, even though I'm so heartbroken that there is no Beis HaMikdash, there's a part of me, and this is going to sound strange, but there's a part of me that is happy with the present circumstances. Again, I don't want it to stay this way, but for now, because it's like this, I'm going to take advantage of what is. And if the shechina is dislocated, if the shechina is homeless, then that means there's easier access. If the king's not in the palace, then he's more accessible even to a regular guy like me. And if he's more accessible to me, I'm going to jump on that. If he's more accessible to me, I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity for connection, to rehabilitate my relationship, to start again, to ask for forgiveness. I want a clean slate. I want a new beginning. I want to start over. Dear friends, who amongst us doesn't want a new slate? It's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I already have wanted a new slate 3 times today. Hey, who doesn't want a new beginning? And comes these days, these 21 days, that parallel 21 days in Hoshana and Hoshana Rabbah, days in which the Shekhinah is more accessible than ever. If we take advantage of it, we too could find that new beginning. So how do we take advantage of the power of these days? How do we activate it for ourselves? How do we take advantage of the fact that the Shekhinah is more accessible than ever? How do I capitalize on using Bein HaMetzarim, not simply as 21 days to mourn that which has been lost, but on 21 days to jumpstart my relationship, to clean the slate, to begin anew? And I'll just make 2 suggestions. Number 1, the Piazetzna of Kormes Kama Shapira, Hashem Yikom Damo, was a great tzaddik. For those of you who don't know about it, in our shul every Thursday night we have a Piazetzna Chabura, Chasidus Chabura. The Rebbe's Torah is of a different world, literally of a different world. So the Rebbe wrote a number of different svarim. One of the svarim that he wrote was B'nei Machshava Tova. And in that sefer, actually, it's very interesting. The genesis of that sefer, he was approached by a group of his talmidim, by a group of his students, who wanted a manual for growth. So the Piazetzna wrote this sefer, called B'nei Machshava Torah. It's to be studied in groups, and essentially it becomes like a, what's the word? It's like a therapeutic group. It's kind of like a spiritual 12-step program. Like, in other words, just like 12-step programs, like addiction, like recovery programs, you don't do them alone, right? You do them with a chevra, because there's a power. There's a power in that when you're surrounded by other people who are struggling with the same type of stuff you're struggling with, and then you go ahead and you aid them and you help each other along that journey. So B'nei Machshava Tova, the Piazetzna, is something so beautiful. The Piazetzna talks about the relationship that we have with Hashem. And he gives a mashal. He says, sometimes, and anyone who's ever had the schus to have a young child knows that what happens. Sometimes a young child comes and says, Abba, right? I created my grandson. I'm very excited. My grandson just started saying Zeda. So I was very, very excited about this. And sometimes a child will just come along and say Abba. Okay, so normally when a parent hears Abba, Ima, so in a parent's mind, what is the parent thinking? What is the parent thinking? Right? What do you need? What do you need, right? So what happens? So the parent picks up the child, right? And the parent's waiting, and the child again says, Abba, right? And the parent's waiting, and then the child simply buries his head in his father's neck and says, Abba. Sometimes the child is not asking for something. He's just asking for Abba. Too often in life, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes transactional. God, I need this. And I'm talking about like good, legitimate things that we need, right? Not the 30-foot yacht. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like legitimate things that I need, right? Legitimate things that are important, that are good. But our entire interaction with the Ribono Shel Olam is transactional. And I need this, and I need this, you're God, and again, all good things. And I want to point out, by the way, asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for things is the most incredible thing in the world because it recognizes that you believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could grant it. Right? The only reason I'm asking is because I believe that Hashem could give it to me, which is the highest form of emunah, which is beautiful and incredible. But there's more to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu than just simply getting what you want. There's also the concept of relationship for the sake of relationship. That sometimes it's beautiful to call out Abba, not because I need anything from Abba, even though I do. I need so much from Abba. But sometimes all I want is just to be held. That's all, or to hold. I don't need something, or I do need something, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. I just want closeness. I just want to be next to you. I just want to feel enveloped by your love. There's a power to having a relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam that is not predicated on what you need, or not predicated because you're afraid of punishment, or afraid of Gehenna, or wanting Gan Eden. But that's the beauty in children. When that little child calls out Abba, there's no ulterior motive that's there. It's just Abba because I want to feel close to Abba. So I think one of the incredible things that we could work on during these days, these 21 days of unparalleled closeness, is carving out a few moments a day just to try to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu without asking for something. Don't ask for something. Don't ask for something. Just closeness for the sake of closeness. Because that little child knows that when Abba picks him up and holds him close, life is better. Life is better. But what did you get? Little child, what did you get? Nothing. My Abba's holding me. And when Abba's holding me, everything is perfect. But it's not. But it is. And perhaps during these 21 days, we're the king, If we think about this, I don't know that we think about this enough. Sometimes we don't realize it, that the same pain and the same loneliness that we feel with everything that's going on, how do you think the shechina feels? Just because the Ribono Shel Olam knows how the story ends, and just because he knows that at the end of the day, everything is going to work out for the good, you don't think he feels pain when we feel pain? You don't think HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks upon us now, seeing the matzav that Klal Yisrael is in, seeing how many families have been shattered, how many people have hearts and souls that are broken in a million pieces? You don't think that causes him pain? And so we want to hug Abba. Sometimes you forget that Abba wants to hug us just as much. Just say, Ribono Shel Olam, I just want to be with you. When you're with someone, you're with someone who you love. I often hear this from young men and women who are dating, and especially like in the shidduch system, they go out, and a lot of it is very staged and very, very rigid. And they'll go out, and a young man or young woman will come back and say, there were moments where we had nothing to talk about. I'm like, and what I want to say is like, sometimes the best moments in my marriage is when we have nothing to talk about, but just being and sitting in the presence of someone who you love. You don't need something to talk about. There doesn't have to be a conversation piece. Just being together is one of the most incredible and overwhelming things. Part one of our avoda during these 3 weeks is just to figure out how to take time to be with Abba. not to ask for something, carve out time. It could be when you daven, it could be a different time. It could be when you're taking a walk by yourself, or it could just be sitting down in a quiet room. If you could find, by chance, a quiet room, close your eyes, not for 20 minutes, for 2 minutes. For 2 minutes, say, Ribono Shalom, I just came to be with you. You know, did you ever do Bikur Cholim to someone? And the chola, the person who's ill, can't talk. And so what do? You hold their hand, you sit there. And your presence is so important. Lahavda, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes all I need to do is just sit there, and I promise you, after the time together, you'll feel so much better, so much more enriched, so much holier. And lastly, because I know that I'm almost out of time, I want to share with you something that I've shared no less than 5 times in the last week. I shared it at my shul last Shabbos. I landed, Baruch Hashem, and then I shared it again at a shir in America. I landed last Thursday, Baruch Hashem, I got to go to a bris. I shared it at a bris, shared it at a kiddush on Shabbos morning, and now I want to share it with all of you again. I'm sorry, a lot of miles. This Dvar Torah got a lot of miles, Baruch Hashem, but I can't stop talking about it, and I can't stop saying it, because the Shmuel Zayda. Shmuel Zayda was one of the great Hasidic Rebbes. He was a Talmud of the Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. And the Shmuel Zayda asked this fascinating question. Shmuel Zayda said, back in Parshas Chukas, you know the story, Moshe Rabbeinu was ordered to go ahead and speak to the rock, but instead he hit the rock. And Shmuel Zayda asks a very interesting question. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock, he actually hit the rock twice, and water came gushing out of the rock. Shmuel Zayda asks, why? Why did it work? Again, remember, Chevra, we know, water doesn't come out of rocks. The only way you get water out of a rock is through divine intervention. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, you need to speak to the rock. The only way to activate the water flowing from the rock is speaking to it. Moshe Rabbeinu disobeyed, and he hit the rock. And the water came flowing forth as the Shmuel Zayda. Again, Chevra, if I were asking, if you were scripting this, right? God says to Moshe, hit the rock. God says to Moshe, speak to the rock. Moshe hits the rock. What should have happened? No, excellent, right? Nothing. Yet, water comes flowing out of the rock. What's the pshat? The Rebbe says something absolutely amazing. The Rebbe says, the rock, the well, came in the schus and the merit of Miriam Hanaviyah. Shmuel Zayda says that when the water came in the merit of one person, the Rebbe writes, it needed a pa'ula gashmis. It needed a physical act. In other words, the merit of one person was enough to bring about the miracle to a degree, but there was still a physical act that was needed to bring out the water. That's why, if you remember again, the first time that Moshe Rabbeinu brought water from the rock, what did he do? He hit the rock. That's the way it was supposed to work. You hit the rock again, it's in the merit of Miriam, right? Merit of Miriam, because the bear was in the merit of Miriam. But again, the schus of one person still requires a physical act to bring about the culmination of the miracle. So therefore, again, Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock, the water came forth. Now Miriam died. Right? So Shmuel Zayda, something amazing. So Miriam died, but the well was still going to continue. In the merit of whom was the well going to continue for Klal Yisrael? In the merit of Moshe and Aaron. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, you no longer have to hit the rock. All you need to do is speak to the rock. That's all you need to do. Just speak to it. And that's enough. But Moshe Rabbeinu says like this, if I speak to the rock, people are going to think that Aaron and I are greater than Miriam. If I speak to the rock, it may potentially denigrate the kavod of my sister. So Moshe Rabbeinu says like this, I have a choice to make. I could obey the Ribono Shel Olam, and hit the rock, and potentially denigrate, speak to the rock, and potentially denigrate the kavod of my sister, or I can go ahead and hit the rock and maintain the kavod of my sister, but defy the Ribono Shel Olam. Which one should I do? And says the Shmuel Zayda, something absolutely amazing. Says the Shmuel Zayda. Moshe Rabbeinu made a calculated act of defiance to uphold the dignity of his sister. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just anger. But Moshe Rabbeinu says, if given the choice between obedience to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and denigrating my sister's kavod, I choose the kavod of another Jew over obedience to the Ribono Shel Olam. Now, says the Shmuel Zayda, don't try that at home. Don't try that at home. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because remember, there are repercussions. Moshe Rabbeinu is punished. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't go into Eretz Yisrael. But says the Rebbe something absolutely amazing. With this, I'll conclude. Says the Rebbe something absolutely amazing, which is at the end of the day, as much as Moshe Rabbeinu did something wrong, the Ribono Shel Olam gave him a shkoyach. And how did he give him a shkoyach? Water flowed out of the rock. You know how sometimes your kids do something wrong, but the thing they did wrong was kind of like a little bit right. It puts a little bit of a smile on your face. You have to discipline them still. But Lamaisa, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu understood what it was that was unfolding over here. So difference, why am I sharing this with you? Because you see from Moshe Rabbeinu, put the kavod of another Jew before obedience to the Ribono Shel Olam. Now again, that is not a model for us to emulate per se, but it teaches us an incredible lesson. How careful we have to be with the dignity and the honor of each other. How careful we have to be about how we treat one another. How careful we have to be about how we speak to and how we speak about one another. The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of sinas chino. The Gemara Maseches Yuma discusses who is greater, the generation of the first Beis HaMikdash or the generation of the second Beis HaMikdash. So it's a whole machlokes. You know what the Gemara says at the end of the day? Bira tochiach. The Beis HaMikdash will prove the point. The first generation, the first Beis HaMikdash, they were zocha to get a second Beis HaMikdash. But our generation has not yet been zocha to reclaim the third Beis HaMikdash. Why? Because we have not yet corrected the avera of sinas chinam. Because sinas chinam, hatred, animosity, sectarianism, is still very much alive and well within our people. Moshe Rabbeinu understood the primacy that one has to give to avas chinam, that one has to give to avas Yisrael. And again, I think one of the most incredible things that we saw in the immediate aftermath of October 7th was the dramatic and beautiful achdus. And l'tza'arenu harav, one of the things that we begin to see fraying within the greater Jewish community is some of that very same achdus. And it's so important for us, whatever our ideologies, whatever our beliefs, to be able to go ahead and speak about one another and to one another, only with the highest level of respect, regard, and love. So if we bring this all together, and with this we'll conclude, at the end of the day, the 21 days ahead of us are perhaps the holiest 21 days of the year, days in which we have access to the shechina like never before. We should utilize them to come closer to Abba. We should utilize them to come closer to one another. And in that zechus, may we be zocha, that before we reach the end of this beautiful and holy 21-day period, may we zocha Amirat Hashem to see all of our hostages returned. May we zocha Amirat Hashem to see all of our soldiers successful b'chol ma'aseh yadayim, come back to their families b'shalom and b'karov. And may we be zocha to go together Amirat Hashem to the Bayis Shlishi b'mheir Rabbi Ameinu. Amen.